Today is April 30th, 2025. My name is Melissa Ackerman, and I am interviewing Michael Fleischer for our Jewish Family Service project. Hi, Michael. How are you today?
Fine. How are you, Melissa?
I am good. When
Nice
were
to
you
see you.
hired by Jewish Family Service?
I was hired in 1993. I came from the Cleveland Jewish Family Service, where I was the assistant executive director at the time I was hired by Dallas. And we moved down to Dallas in September, just before the high holidays.
And you were hired as executive director
The
for
title at
Dallas.
that time was executive director. The title changed some years later to CEO.
Okay. And why did you go to work for Jewish Family Service?
Well, I went to work for JFS in Cleveland because JFS had the best reputation for clinical services of any of the organizations in the greater North Ohio area. Fortunately, they had an opening, and I had just graduated from Case Western Reserve School of Applied Social Sciences with a major in mental health, and they hired me. And so I worked for about, 6 years, 5 or 6 years, doing individual marital family counseling. And at that point, the then executive director, Bert Rubin, asked me if I wanted to take on some administrative responsibilities. And I was a little reluctant to do it. And we sort of compromised. I did a little bit of administration, a little bit of clinical, but you couldn't really balance the two and do each of them well. So I wound up going full force into administration, and that's what I was doing when the search committee tapped me, if you will. At JFS in Cleveland, I was doing administrative work for budgeting and program development and program evaluation, and doing a lot of grant writing as well. Worked specifically with the resettlement program, with the gerontology program, with the clinical services program here, and realized with each passing year the importance of a community family service agency and how much it meant to people to be able to turn to their community at their time of need for help, especially if you were Jewish and could turn to a Jewish community agency for help. And so the importance of Jewish family service sort of grew on me year after year after year, and I was very pleased to be able to continue my career at a Jewish family service in Dallas.
Did you miss doing the clinical work?
Yeah, and I will say that the skills you have in doing clinical work can be applicable in administrative work because you're dealing with people, and while you're not counseling people or therapizing people, you are dealing with people, and so
Give me
having
one
people
second.
skills is a big asset. But yes, I did miss it, and in some ways I still do miss it. It's a profession doing the counseling that makes a huge difference on a very personal level that you really get to see. And at an administrative level, you're just a little bit removed from seeing it as directly. You certainly see a lot of it, but it's just one step removed. And yeah, that part you do miss a little bit.
Mhm. What lay people did you work with over the years?
Well, the list is pretty extensive, and I don't know that either of us have the time to go
You were
through.
mentioned in a lot of layperson interviews that I did. A lot of past presidents mentioned your name and how well you worked with them over the years and how much respect they have for you.
That's sweet to hear. And yes, I mean, I worked with a whole bunch of very effective presidents, now past presidents.
Mhm.
And I worked with some of the presidents who were there even before I got there, who maintained their connection to the agency and continued to be passionate about the agency. But I also worked with lots of volunteers on committees and on all kinds of projects, and then lots of people in the Jewish and general community, whether it was at Federation or JCC or a whole list of synagogues, whether it was at United Way or at some of the foundations or some of the other social service agencies like Catholic Charities or um, um, I'm drawing a blank real quick. Well, draw a blank real quick. You'll find me doing that on occasion
Okay,
from time to time.
no problem.
So I mean, if I started to do a list of names, I know I would inadvertently leave out very important people.
Okay.
And I felt very blessed that Dallas in general as a whole had wonderful volunteers and lay people and lay leaders that made a huge difference in so many ways. You're, Melissa, by the way, an example of that in all the different things that you've done over the years. And there were many, many, many Melissas that made themselves available to very generously give their time and expertise to their communities.
That's very nice. What programs and services began or ended or evolved during your time with JFS?
Well, again, it's sort of a long list, and I'm
Just
going to
highlight it if they're a couple.
apologize in advance for the ones I might
Okay.
inadvertently overlook. But when I was hired and before I got to Dallas, the director of the Beth Torah preschool, Esther Cohen, called me at home here in Cleveland because that's where I was, and she said, one of the first things you need to do, Mike, is you need to get the school mental health program back in gear. And I'm speaking on behalf of a number of other directors of preschool here, and we really want you to get that back in gear. And so one of the things, among all the other first things you have to do when you start a new job, was starting to reach out to the schools to find out what it is that they felt JFS could provide that would be beneficial. And so the school mental health program sort of got a reboot. And we began with the preschools, and it grew over the years to a very, very, very comprehensive school mental health program that includes diagnostic testing and OT and when I left, we were involved in every single preschool, day school, and high school in the Jewish community to one degree or another, on site as well as providing services at the office. So that was one big program that really has made a big difference in the community over many, many years now. Other programs that started, while the agency certainly saw in its clinical services individuals, families, women, children impacted by family violence. We sort of formalized the family violence program under the leadership of Ariella Goldstein,
Yes.
who has provided and continues to provide tremendous leadership in developing comprehensive services to address the needs of individuals, primarily women and children, but not exclusively, who have been impacted by family violence. And that included, support groups and individual counseling and workshops for the community, including professional conferences that were accredited by Southwestern Hospital System. And so it became very, very embracing of those people in need of those kinds of services. We even at one point, with the cooperation of many organizations, schools and synagogues, the Federation, the JCC, had little information cards in the women's restrooms, in the stalls, that provided information that they could take privately and confidentially to use if needed about the services both within the Jewish and Greater Dallas community. And that was a big step because like many issues, family violence was an issue that fell into the category of it doesn't happen in the Jewish community. And the Jewish community is just like any community. There is family violence, there is addiction. When I first started, AIDS was a big issue. And again, it fell into that category of it didn't impact the Jewish community, but some families came forward and asked us to please provide services to address the impact of HIV/AIDS on both the individuals infected and the families who are affected by HIV/AIDS. And so that program took root in some of my early days. Other programs that were developed, again, while we did some play therapy, when we moved into our new building, we were able to put in a specialized play therapy room. So that got expanded, and we were able to add on some diagnostic testing for children, which was a big enhancement of our services to children. Our special needs initiatives, again, took the services that we had that were in very beginning stages and expanded them to where we were able to have a network of resources for families and individuals with special needs, children with special needs. Excuse me. We incorporated PLAN, which was a organization that served the chronically mentally ill, into the JFS umbrella. Lots of different specialized support groups to address specific needs that heretofore might not have gotten the attention they deserved, and people needing that resource, not having the resource available until we put in those support groups. What else? You mentioned services that discontinued. When I first got there, resettlement was still a very active service, and we were still doing family reunifications. Unfortunately, when I first got there, the service was under a microscope because an audit from HIAS pointed out some things that needed to be improved significantly. I'm pleased to say that within 2 years of my getting there, HIAS came back and did a follow-up audit and gave us very high praise for not only what we had done to address the issues, but how well we were continuing to do that and more so. But eventually the resettlement program tapered off, as it did nationally, as things changed in terms of both the numbers of people who needed to leave the former Soviet Union to rejoin families, as well as the requirements for family reunification. The adoption program was also another program that was active when I
Freezing up.
And had a wonderful history behind it. But that too, because of changes in the adoption process and how birth mothers could make their children available for adoption, as well as the requirements for families who wanted to adopt to follow, both changed. And the numbers of families that we were able to work with who or the number of women we were able to work with who wanted to put their children up for adoption dwindled, so that eventually was no longer a service of the agency. Other services we started a food pantry in Vickery Meadow. That was an outgrowth of our Katrina effort, and we did that in conjunction with many Jewish community and general organizations. We also started mental health services on site in Jubilee Park in conjunction with their community center. So that was a new initiative there as well. We started a guardianship program early on when I got there, and that had a lifespan of about, I guess, maybe 10, maybe a few more
Mhm.
years than that,
Okay.
until it became apparent that it wasn't as needed in terms of numbers as it was. And so we incorporated the ability to do that into our general operation. But we had the guardianship program. I'm sure I'm leaving something
You
else out.
got you. How many years were you with JFS in total?
23
In
years,
Dallas, 23.
23 years, yeah.
And what changes in the Jewish community occurred that influenced how JFS responded to the community's needs?
Well, I'll reference something that I said just a moment ago, and that is as we educated the community about issues like family violence, like AIDS, like special needs, the changes in the community were such that the community rose to the occasion to say, okay, now that we know more, now that we're more aware of some of these needs, we want to work with Jewish Family Service and other organizations to address them more comprehensively. And so that was, a gradual, continual, positive, big change over time that took place. Other changes, as the demographics showed, the community had more of a population in Plano and far north Dallas and those areas than they had previously. That influenced our thinking about where we would try and locate our first home, our first building that was truly ours. And it influenced us going to Arapahoe and the tollway, which moved us closer to that population and accessible via the tollway, as well as still very accessible to the community that lived south of there. So that was a significant change in the community, and the capital campaign that helped make that building possible was
What year was that? Do you recall? Or years?
ooh, the capital campaign. So we moved into our building around 2000, 2001.
Mhm.
So the capital campaign probably started about 1998-ish. And we were actually one of the first beneficiaries of the capital campaign because we had started to do our due diligence on finding a place for ourselves. Even as the idea of a capital campaign was first taking root. Um, and we were very supportive of the idea of a community capital campaign. In fact,
Mhm.
at the beginning of the capital campaign, they handed out to the various agency leadership little white hats that said community hat on it. You may
Mhm.
recall the phrase, you need to wear your community hat.
Community hat.
And so we all have community hats. In fact, I still have mine.
Mhm.
Um, but the capital campaign was a big change for the community in that, the organizations involved were all working in concert with one another towards fundraising
Mhm.
goals that while each of us had, we were all sort of rowing together to gain so that our community wasn't hit, if you will, or asked, if you will, by multiple organizations pretty much at the same time to make capital contributions.
Mhm. How did you work with the other constituent agencies or other Jewish agencies in the community? Did you have regular times to meet together? How did you all communicate or work with each other?
We tended to work more one-on-one than in community meetings. Although that said, the Federation in its community organizing role would periodically bring us together, both to update us on community developments and for us to be able to update those assembled on some of the things that were going on within our respective organizations. There were coalitions that JFS sort of spearheaded, as I mentioned, as it relates to family violence and as it relates to special needs, that brought community organizations together to work on various initiatives. But maybe it was a style issue. My style tended to err on the side of having those kinds of one-to-one relationships, or having our JFS staff, either with me or on their own, have those one-to-one relationships, so that not only would we work together, but so that when organizations had the need to refer to the agency, or had a need that they thought the agency might be able to meet, they knew who they were working with. They not only had a face and a name, they had a relationship to work with. And I think that helped in many regards with our having offsite services with many of the organizations in our community, both Jewish and general.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges you faced during your time with the agency?
Well, when I first got there, I mentioned the challenge related to the resettlement program. There was also a challenge in that the agency, which had been accredited several years before, its accreditation had lapsed. And so that to me was, and to the board, which actually in their strategic planning, they underscored that the accreditation was an important quality for the agency. That was two initial challenges. The third initial challenge when I got there was as I met community leaders, many of them were of the opinion that while JFS is a very valuable organization to the community, somehow they had lost contact, if you will, and the agency needed to think about how it could be and then act on how it could be more responsive to some of what the community leadership in various organizations was bringing forward. So that was a challenge. And to the board's credit, they looked at each of those challenges and took it very seriously, and gave us the go-ahead to make it happen. And so I mentioned the highest report was a positive one 2 years later. We also were fully accredited in all of our service areas 2 years later. And
Who does the accreditation? Who is it with?
the Council on Accreditation of Services to Families and Children, it's a national organization, and it accredits a wide variety of social service and mental health organizations. There were a few organizations like Catholic Charities who were accredited in Dallas, maybe two other organizations, but they weren't accredited for the full range of services that we were accredited for.
A separate accreditation part for each type of
Yes.
service?
Yes, so
Okay.
we were accredited for clinical services and for employment services, and at the time for resettlement services and for gerontology services. They also look at the administration of the agency, and so you get accredited for having good fiscal practices, for good governance practices, for good personnel policy practices. It was a very, very comprehensive process, and one that the agency continues to this day to their credit, because here you had an outside entity coming in and saying, you know, you guys are doing work that's consistent with national professional standards. You're doing, good work on all these levels. And so your board and your community and people who might turn to you for help can have confidence that they will be handled in a very professional way and effective way. So that was some of the early challenges. Another challenge sort of related to this was the rise in the importance of outcome measures. Many funders, United Way being one of the leading advocates for this, impressed the importance and actually eventually required that organizations do outcome measures. And that required organizations to more formally have clients define their goals, and then on a regular basis, have the client self-evaluate along with the professional how they were doing in reaching those goals. And that information then would be aggravated.
It was aggravating.
The process was aggravating to many people, I will say, in all honesty,
Sounds
but
very
it
harsh.
was very meaningful. And to correct Freud's slip right now, the information was aggregated so that you got a full picture of how a department was doing, how a program was doing. It was less about evaluating individual practitioners and more about the impact the department or the program was having. And to our professionals' great credit, we always had very, very positive outcomes. I mean, they embraced the process, and they were able to be effective in their work as demonstrated by the client evaluation of their own goal progress. And when we aggregated it, there I go again, it presented a very positive picture of the agency, which in turn made our funding requests that much more impactful, because when we go to United Way, which also funded on a program by program basis, they moved away from funding an agency and moved towards funding programs specifically. And we got funded for 5 or 6 programs by United Way. It made our presentations more impactful. And eventually the Federation was
Federation's gone.
very, pardon me?
Federation has gone to that system
Yes,
as far as
eventually the
allocation.
Federation got to that, both
Yes.
allocation wise as well as outcome measure wise. And foundations looked at that, and it became sort of what you needed to do to go get funding, whether it was from governmental sources or private sources. And it was impactful for the donor too. I mean, we would report it in our annual reports, and we would report it at various fundraising events, and it made a difference in terms of people knowing that their investment was having a very, very positive impact.
Do you remember how many clients you were serving? Um,
Oh,
uh,
um,
I know the agency has changed dramatically over the
yeah,
years and grown so much.
The number of clients served sort of is an interesting statistic, because our food pantry, which was also accredited, our food and also had its challenge too. If I go back to your prior question, the food pantry when I got there was in the bottom level of the Federation, and there were some that the Federation worked very hard to try and remedy, and eventually did remedy, although it was after we had left. And bringing the food pantry to our new home at Arapahoe, our building at Arapahoe, allowed for a greater integration of that service with all the other services, because if you need food, you often have other needs as well. So that was a challenge. But the food pantry numbers, because when you serve a family with food, you may be serving 4 people, and so you get 4 numbers out of that. If you provide counseling to an individual, we don't count it as counseling to 4 people in the family unless the family's involved in the counseling, even though the family may be impacted by the counseling. So the food pantry numbers were, I don't know, maybe 3,000 when I first got there. And the rest of the agency, the clinical services, the resettlement services, the employment services, the gerontology services, and the support groups were probably another 2,500 maybe to start with. And then as resettlement shrunk and as adoption shrunk and other services grew, the numbers aggregated didn't appear to grow that fast, but really we were serving many more people in other areas where they hadn't been being served before in those numbers. I think when I left, our numbers were over 10,000 people. Yeah, close to 11,000 people, I think, in the year that I left. And that doesn't count the year we had the Katrina experience where our numbers just ballooned because we served more than 5,000 people from evacuees in that time period with an absolutely amazing effort by our staff, by our lay leadership, by the Jewish community in general on all levels, and by the greater Dallas community on all levels. It was a true humanitarian, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, it was a true humanitarian model of people coming together. You couldn't have asked for anything better than how everybody responded to those needs. And the evacuees themselves were very supportive of one another, making sure that not only were they able to get their needs met, but making sure if they knew of other evacuees who had needs, to help those people get their needs met. And we worked specifically with about 120 evacuees from the community, the Jewish community of New Orleans. And we helped them find relatives who had gone elsewhere, and we helped them settle into Dallas, some of whom have stayed permanently and are now among the leadership of Jewish Family Service. And some of whom went back to New Orleans. But those numbers really skewed in that particular year.
Right. Well, the outpouring of support at Katrina time was really something. It was
Yeah, and it was also a wonderful demonstration of what we termed, our continuum of services at JFS. Because when people came from Katrina, they really did need almost every service. It wasn't just about food. It was about getting housing. It was about getting blankets and clothing. And
was that when the phrase wraparound services became
thank you for
was
bringing
out there
that up.
most?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for bringing that up. It was an excellent example of wraparound services. And you needed counseling because the trauma of it all was such, and you needed employment, even if it was temporary employment. And so the wraparound service model really was highlighted, was really in a beautiful spotlight. And again, to the staff's credit, and to Janine Pullman's credit as volunteer coordinator, who worked with lots and lots of established JFS volunteers and a whole bunch of new people who came forward. It all came together in that wraparound service model, and everybody worked exceptionally hard and went the extra mile to address all those needs. It was just a wonderful highlighting experience in that regard.
In relation to your time at JFS, what are you most proud?
Well, I've mentioned some of the things already. I'm certainly most proud of the staff over the many, many years. They have to be first and foremost in anything that is said about the agency, because they're doing really the online, hands-on work that is very complicated, and they're doing it in a confidential, professional way, and they're doing it, in coordination with their colleagues and with other resources in the community, and they're maintaining just expertise and high standards. So, any year, any day, the thing to be most proud of at JFS is the work of the staff, and everything else while we can be proud of it, is because of their efforts. The board is a real close second, and volunteers are a real close second, because the dedication and the expertise that they bring, and the support that they've been able to generate increasingly over the years, now as best exemplified by the capital campaign. The board is a tremendous asset, and works very well with the staff of JFS, and is a wonderful source of referral for JFS, and helps make connections. I mentioned the Jubilee Park mental health service. A board member helped introduce us to the possibility of making that happen. There were other board members who certainly took incredible leadership roles in terms of the services to individuals, children, and adults with special needs. And the board member really led that process tremendously. Board member led the process to help establish our family violence program. Board members led the process to develop some of our more visible fundraising efforts, like Women to Women, and before that, like For the Love of Family, and we had a tennis tournament for a couple of years. And so, the impact of the board can't be, and the marketing efforts. Board members really took a lead in helping get JFS's name out there and develop our materials to market. And when things went online and electronic, to help us make that leap, board members took a tremendous lead in helping us find our new home, our facility on Arapahoe, as I understand they did with our new building
Newest
as
home.
well. Pardon me?
With the newest home.
With the
that's
newest home,
coming
yes.
up. Mhm.
Yes, with the newest home. So, again, I can go on and on and on and on about the impact of board members and all the volunteers that they represent, who may not have been on the board, but who certainly had an impact, including people who would come, like weekly to help in the Job Search Resource Center and in the food pantry, and delivering meals on wheels to people, to name just very, very few examples.
Okay. Something about Jewish Family Service that is not commonly known that you want the community to know and understand.
We are, always have been, and will continue to be, a very transparent organization. So I hope the answer that I give is something that everybody knows and says, he didn't really come up with anything that the community doesn't know. But I mentioned it earlier, that we are the only organization in North Dallas, North Texas, that has the continuum of services, the wraparound services that we have, that's nationally accredited. And so, again, that is a huge seal of approval, a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, to the fine work that goes on with the agency.
Okay. Describe the value of Jewish Family Service to the Dallas Jewish community.
Well, I think for a community to be able to turn to a resource that is sensitive to Jewish values, and is non-judgmental, and is highly confidential, and can provide services in one location, or at least under one umbrella, is a very valuable resource, and very comforting to know that your community cares enough about you and your family and your friends and your neighbors to help make these services and this agency available to you at whenever you might need it. And it was always our belief that anyone in the Jewish community might at some time need JFS because we all experience life's transitions, and we all experience unexpected developments in our lives. And so while not everybody necessarily needs the services we have when those occur, it may be useful for many, many, many people.
Is
Knowing
there
that it's
anything
there
else?
for you
Oh,
is a.
I'm sorry,
No,
it
go
froze
ahead.
up for a second there.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think you did. I was at a stopping point, although I'm not sure what the last thing you heard was, but I'm sure since I ramble, I said what I needed to say anyway.
Okay. Is there anything else we didn't talk about or anybody you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
Well, thinking, and while I avoided answering the question about leadership by name, who I worked with, because that would be really too long. And I'm a little reluctant to mention staff that I would want to give a shout out to, because there's so many staff who deserve a shout out. But when you talk about staff leadership, um, when I came, there was a core of very experienced, long-term JFS staff who were there, who had provided leadership and continued to provide leadership once I was there, including Clara Linetsky, who was a long-term accountant who made sure our books were always in good shape. And to Clara's benefit and to Clara's praise, and to the praise of the accountants and comptrollers who followed her, the JFS always had clean audits and always never had a financial crisis during my time there. So Clara Lansky would certainly be someone I'd want to mention. Sherry Portwood, who was the director of clinical services, Bunny Radman, who directed gerontology, Sue Saya, who was the beloved volunteer coordinator, who was succeeded by another beloved volunteer coordinator in Janine Pullman, Ariella Goldstein, who did and does continue to do tremendous work, as I mentioned before. Dr. Shelley Middleman, who was sort of behind the scenes a lot, but who had a great, great impact in terms of helping to develop the clinical practice at JFS. Lorraine Stevens, who was the resettlement coordinator, Camille Kramer, who was the current employment coordinator. I would not want to not mention Kathy Barker, because she certainly not only provided leadership when I was there, but has gone above and beyond the term leadership to provide it as her tenure as a CEO and president. Who else am I leaving out? Many, many people. Debbie Weiner, who became the director of gerontology after Bunny retired, and Louise Gold, who was a long-standing gerontologist there, who again, more behind the scenes, but still a leader based on her tenure and experience. Let's see, this is the trap I was worried about getting myself into, but it is what it is. I'm well intended here.
Yeah.
Um,
You worked at a growing agency for a very long time, so it's hard to remember everybody that did wonderful work over the years. But I want to thank you so much. Oh, you want to double check and make sure you didn't leave anybody out?
If you don't mind, let me just do a quick check, because I'll feel horrible.
We don't want you to feel horrible. And by the way, we have talked to and interviewed quite
Oh,
a large number of the people that you mentioned.
So a couple of other names I do. I'm
Okay,
embarrassed that I didn't call them
okay.
immediately. Certainly Rabbi Wolk, our chaplain, Karen Hout, who was the office manager, who again was behind the scenes for many years, Janice Leaves Dorcas, who really sort of put our marketing on the map, so to speak. She really was the springboard from a professional standpoint, from a staff standpoint, who complemented all the wonderful work of a whole variety of lay leaders, both board and non-board, and Allison Harding, who took over career and employment services as well. Again, a couple more names, and now I'm going to be embarrassed I didn't mention so many other people who have done so much for the community, both on the board as volunteer and as staff.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for all you did for JFS for those many years and for sitting down and talking with me today. I've really enjoyed it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for including me in this and taking the time. And if there's anything else I can do to add to the history of JFS, I'm more than happy to spend more time interviewing.
Thank you.
Be
Thank you. Really
well, and
appreciate
say
it.
hi to Bear for me, and
I
I look
will.
forward to seeing you next week.
We will see you. Thank you so much.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.